Greetings, Arsha here. I have one question for you. Have you ever wanted to do this on Vecna? Yummy. Or this? Like sometimes if you're lucky, you get a survivor grunt. Sometimes if you're lucky. Well, I got the trick for you.
Spell canceling.
Why am my boy looking like Jericho Swain? Spell canceling, or spanceling, is the act of charging a spell while going through the animation of putting away another spell, therefore canceling the animation, hence why it's called spancelling. Now, is this an intended feature? No. Is this technically bug abuse? Maybe. Is it any buggier than like 99% of whatever the fuck Wesker has? Where is he going? Probably not. And while it might not look as useful or as necessary as Wesker's techs, they have their uses. And they look very cool. But first we must ask the question, how do you spancel? And that's a simple question to answer. Alright, for this demonstration and basically anytime you're practicing spanceling, you're going to want to use Flight of the Damned because the lines that show up are very useful for knowing when you're timing things correctly. So in order to start spanceling, what you need to do is you need to tap the spell button. So I tap, in this case, I would tap right click. You can tell you're doing it correctly because the HUD at the bottom will disappear and instantly come back. If you do it incorrectly, like if you hold it for too long, then the HUD doesn't instantly come back. So you just need to tap it like this. Now, in order to spancel, all you need to do is cast normally after tapping, after a short delay. So I would do tap, hold. Tap, hold. You see how the lines pop up, but my hands are still putting away the spell? That's how you know you're doing it correctly. And then all you need to do is press left click. Sorry. Now make sure you don't take too long, as if you hold the button for long enough, the put away animation will end, and then you'll just hold out your spell normally. We don't want that. So remember, tap, hold, tap, hold. Right. If you do it too quickly, it'll just you'll just put up your spell. So you want to tap, hold. And again, Flight of the Damned is amazing for practicing because you can see the lines, and that basically tells you when you can cast. Now that we have the basics, we can practice swapping spells. If you tap your spell, you can actually change your spell. So while putting away Flight of the Damned, for example, you can swap to Mage Hand and then lift up a palette. This lets you use a spell to mask another spell. For example, if you wanted to cast Flight of the Damned, you could mask Dispelling Sphere into the Flight of the Damned cast, which is quite useful for survivors who are looking for visual cues or auditory cues, especially for Flight of the Damned because it plays the like the zoom.
Can you tell that entire section was done in one take?
Don't worry if you struggle to spancel at first. You can always practice in a custom game or while you're patrolling between generators, because who actually needs to be patrolling generators? Eventually, you'll start quick hitting those hand signals like you're a Naruto character. Alright, now that you're allegedly a spancel master, you might be wondering, Archie, how the heck am I supposed to implement this into my gameplay? Where do I even spancel? If you're not wondering that, well, then you are now. Anyways, let's go over the use cases spell by spell. Starting with... perhaps the flashiest spell you can spancel with is Flight of the Damned. But are there actual useful use cases for spanceling Flight of the Damned? Okay, that's a bit harsh.
And true.
Okay, other than looking really cool, one possible use case is using Mage Hand and spanceling into Flight of the Damned. Since the survivor will see the palette indicator, indicating you're holding Mage Hand, they might try to greet another loop. You can take advantage of this to drop Flight of the Damned straight onto their head. You can also spancel into Flight of the Damned with Dispelling Sphere in order to mask the animation. Most survivors won't react majorly to Dispelling Sphere due to having not much effect in loops, and therefore you can mask the pullout animation of Flight of the Damned, replacing it with a non-lethal spell. This will definitely catch some survivors off guard. And then, of course, spanceling Flight of the Damned into itself ensures all the ladies around you know that you are hot, single, and available. Whether they follow up or not is another story. Anyways, enough of Flight of the Damned. While its spancels are not the most useful thing, they are by far the most flashy, and they will definitely catch survivors off guard sometimes. Now, let's move on to a spell that keeps auto-locking onto random pallets in the distance. No, seriously, why the fuck does it do that? Mage Hand spancels are interesting. Vecna will perform the Mage Hand animation if you spancel into it regardless. It's just dramatically faster. Spanceling into Mage Hands can help mask the palette effect, indicating that you've readied Mage Hands. An important thing to note is that you don't actually have to cast Mage Hand instantly. If you tap and then hold M2, as long as the little arrow above the palette is there, you'll be able to cast Mage Hands. You can use this indicator to practice your Spancels, and to min-max how long after the tap you have to wait in order to actually cast the spell. Since obviously if you wait too long, then the animation ends, and then the normal Mage Hand prompt comes up. Why would you want that? Spancelling Mage Hand into itself is actually quite good. It lets you hold down Mage Hand without having the little palette effect play the entire time, as well as possibly confuse the survivor into whether or not you're faking Mage Hand or not. It'll fool survivors who pay careful attention to your hands, not to be confused with his other hands.
Brigands.
Spancelling Flight of the Damned into Mage Hand is also quite nice, especially against experienced survivors. Most survivors will begin to crouch when you ready Flight of the Damned, especially around pallets. With this Spancel tech, you can coerce them to crouch and then instantly Mage Hand the pallet. As you should know, any amount of distance you can get around Mage-handed pallets is invaluable. The survivor crouching will make them lose distance, allowing to hit them even easier. Overall, you'll mostly be Spancelling Mage Hand just to mask its animation. It's quite useful for keeping the survivors on their toes and making them be like, oh my god, he's faking Mage Hand! He was not faking Mage Hand. However, there's a spell that's even better at confusing the survivors when Spancelled into, and it's a spell you might not expect. We all know it, we all love it, it's the Fly spell. The spell that's kind of built like an Oni dash without the Oni. There's actually some pretty trippy things we can do with Fly, but before we get into that, I find it really important to mention that the timing for Spancelling Fly into something else or Fly into itself is really weird. Therefore, I would recommend not beginning a Spancel with Fly unless you get used to the timing. Another thing that I would like to mention, which will prove useful for the upcoming Spancels, is Fly tapping. This is the act of canceling Fly instantly by tapping the Fly button twice. That lets you go over pallets and windows quickly. The reason that this is important is because of the unique way the Fly animation works when you Spancel into Fly. For some reason, when you say Spancel Flight of the Damned into Fly, you will actually start flying before you actually raise yourself up. This is because you never perform the Fly prep animation where Vecna lifts himself up. Therefore, he has to lift himself up while he's flying. You can use this to your advantage to throw the survivors off guard. If you Spancel something into Fly at windows or pallets, it'll literally look like you're walking through the window/pallet, like you're my cat walking into my room just to want to leave like 5 seconds later. Literally the only indicator the survivor has is the audio cue. They might not be able to tell that you flied over the pallet because you don't actually perform the Fly animation. This is also useful at pallets, however, you'll have to shove tech yourself due to the pallet size. Overall, it doesn't really matter what you Spancel into Fly, it's mostly the exact same. Just keep in mind that the timing is different if you're Spancelling Fly into something else. Anyways, moving on to the most important spell to Spancel, by far. Moving on to... Let's go. Dispelling Spheres. Dispelling Spheres. Okay, so basically what you want to do with Dispelling Sphere is...